podcast. This is not about legal issues. It's not about criminal justice. This is purely a personal podcast with BJ about things that are troubling us going on in the world, affecting Israel, Jews around the world, Christians, Muslims, etc., and how I feel that things are hitting a point where we've crossed the line where there's no way back. That we are losing our civility, that we are losing our decency, that we're losing the social contract that brings us together as a society, where we are to respect each other and be an inclusive society. I'm thinking that's going out the window. And it's very disheartening.
I think it's important what we do, because this is a very important issue for not just us, for I think everybody in the West right now, is let's start this episode and just talk about things from a cultural and philosophical perspective, just in general, not get into the weeds of specifics. And, if this works well and the feedback is positive, then we'll revisit again.
Can we have a little bit of geopolitics in here too?
A little bit, a little bit. But I wanted to just start by asking you, because we've now known each other, 3-4 years?
4 years, I think, yeah.
So we've gotten to know each other, and I've seen some different shifts, not just amongst you, but many other people. Mm-hmm. What's your just general assessment beyond, okay, the world's on fire?
Yeah, the world's on fire.
I don't think it is, actually.
Oh, no, I think it is.
But talk me through your evolution and how you've evolved and what were the key, I think we know the key moments for you, but just in general for everybody else. What have you observed in terms of a change? How's it made you feel?
Well, my optics come from, a different, a combined perspective. My father was a Holocaust survivor where 99% of the family were murdered. Mm. My mother was Irish Catholic from Dublin. My family on that side has very close ties to Ireland. Interestingly enough, they follow a lot of history and are pro-Israel. But I come from various perspectives. I've always been a student of international relations and history. And what I've seen happen over the last 4 or 5 years has been that's why it's hard for me to not talk about geopolitics. I've seen, a shifting sort of in the world order where there has been, it started within the United States, where there's been more of an inward interest as opposed to a general interest. And I've just seen different alignments happen where I think very dangerous forces are much more significant now than ever. It just doesn't start with what happened on October 7th or when people want to talk about the existence of Israel and the displacement of the Palestinians or any of that. This starts much more deeper in the desires of countries to change the political structure in the world and the power structure in the world. And, I guess most notably, Iran has continued to try and become a hegemony in the Middle East. They are countering Saudi Arabia. They don't want Israel to have peace with Saudi Arabia. We see the alignment of Russia with China and Iran, which is very dangerous. And, you look at the war in Ukraine, say whatever you want about it. It's unprecedented where you have a war on European territory like this, to this scale. And we see fracturing of alliances like we haven't seen before. Turkey's a perfect example in NATO.
Turkey's got a whole bunch of other issues.
They've got a lot of issues, but that country evolved from one that had, very close ties to Israel, where they had joint military exercises, to now extremely anti-Jewish, anti-Israel, anti-West, as far as I'm concerned, pro-Russia, and we're seeing the rise of extremism on all sorts of sides, left, right. I'm just seeing a momentous shift in many areas that cause me great concern.
Let me ask, we'll get back to Turkey in a second because it's a great example. Who do you think is causing all of this? Just your opinion.
Well, it's not. I don't think it's just one set of people.
course not,
I
yeah.
think it's a combination. Look, you follow money, and follow those who want power. I think Iran has a significant role. I think Russia has a significant role,
Okay.
and China. Not to mention the meddling that the United States has done enough meddling to cause problems across the world, but I don't see them as the main problems in the last several years.
What do you think leads to having protests in cities across Canada or the United States where people are fully embracing jihadism and uttering some of the vitriol that we never thought would be uttered again? Gas, X group, kill this group sort of thing. Where do you think that comes from?
I think it's been brewing for over 20 to 30 years.
Okay.
I think there has been groups infiltrating our schools, our academia, our universities, our politics, pushing for a particular narrative, which is anti-West. Jews are easy to pick on, and money has just flown into this country to engender this, and I think it's been percolating for a long time. And I think it's because of the desire to destabilize what we have as a country.
And how does all of this make you feel?
Angry, pissed off, and I fear for my children and their children. Canada, we're all very fortunate to live in this country. It's a wonderful country. I enjoy the United States. I enjoy, England, and I think Canada is a gorgeous country with good people and decency. I often talk about how proud I am about I say there's problems with the judicial system and our criminal justice system, but I think it's a beacon in the world. I'm very proud of it. I think although I disagree with politicians across the board, we generally have as good as it gets with respect to a political system. It's never going to be perfect. But there are those and there are forces that want to alter that. I mean, it's been throughout time. We have 10,000 years of history and conflict amongst humanity. You can't just look at the last 20 years. That's why when, I may ramble a little bit, but when you look at curriculum in high school, you know how many history courses you have to take to pass school? Like one in high school. Introduction to Canadian history. Well, there's a lot of other history out there. And when you don't have that full context and understanding about how we got here over this last thousands of years, you have a very myopic view of things. And then I think people are extremely ripe for disinformation and to be indoctrinated into views that they hold now. And you're going to talk about culture, I think. And I just think there has been a cultural shift because of misinformation, elimination of thinking, critical thinking of history, and pushing a narrative that is meant, in my opinion, to destabilize Western civilization, period.
Yeah, I agree. So a couple of things. You mentioned Turkey.
You don't go down a Dundas in Yonge Street and see the type of shit that you see and look around and say, oh, it's Canada. You just don't. Right. You don't see people throwing off firebombs or have Hamas flags or, chanting, legal resistance, Intifada forever, walking down streets in Jewish neighborhoods, chanting and screaming, standing in front of synagogues and schools, burning of churches. This is no different than what happened to other communities, other marginalized segments of our society. Systemic discrimination against Black Canadians and the history that goes with that. What's happened to the Indigenous? This is not different. It's just now, it's what we've experienced for thousands of years against Jewish people, and it's now here and it's normalized. But it's not normal that you would go watch the air show and have people yelling and screaming at people who are watching it, chanting and saying that. That's just not Canada. And, f you if you don't agree with me. I really don't care. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to protest. It's okay to have discourse. It's okay to say, those politics are wrong. This is wrong. This is causing harm. This is causing suffering. That is okay. What's not okay is to target people specifically, to tear down the mezuzah on my office, not once but twice. A guy who's dedicated his life to defending people against discrimination and against unfair justice, no matter where you've come from. That's not right.
It's interesting. We never discussed why I got into podcasting. And it's for the same reason that I got into politics and I ran for the Conservatives. I had a business on Ryerson's campus. And around 2012, 2013, it's like somebody hit a switch. Everything changed. You know, you'd get to know in the business that I had, we had a graphics shop. So it's almost like one of those businesses, it's collaborative. They bring in portfolios, you work with them to output them, and you get to know them over a period of 4 years. And all of a sudden, you saw there was some sort of, what Gadsad calls the parasitic mind, what Stephen Hicks, Open College with Stephen Hicks, Season 2, releasing soon, by the way. What Stephen Hicks talks is his thesis about postmodernist theory, that we're living in the postmodern age. And all of a sudden, 2012, 2013, the student body and the faculty changed. It was nothing but victimization grievances. Like all of a sudden, everybody had been poisoned. We'd see
Oppressor, oppressed.
We'd see that's
been coming on since I was in law school.
Yes. So we'd get to know the students. They would be normal. We'd get to know them. They would even go into the industry, architecture, interior design sort of thing. We'd maintain relationships with them, get clients from them. Like it was great. We all knew each other. And all of a sudden, the 2013, 14 students would be in the second year. The hair would turn green. Or they would start complaining about the patriarchy and misogyny and tattoos everywhere. And I'm like, I'm not against tattoos and piercings, but things got a little overboard. And then I started to see newcomers to Canada, which, okay, I'm not against newcomers, but newcomers with Saudi passports dressed like Osama bin Laden. The Syrian kids that would come into my shop, and I would start hearing them talking about Jews, and then they would want to print these posters from the river to the sea. And I'm like, okay, there's a problem here. And I remember this one particular kid. He's from Syria. His name is Yasser, and really nice kid. He was very excited to be in the Western world, always dreamed of being in the US or Canada. And we connected. We were in the same type of music, same type of cars. And you didn't know anybody here. So he'd come in, yeah, where should I go? What's a good club and whatever. Really good kid. Second year he was here, he was a little bit depressed, felt alone, couldn't really meet somebody, thinks he has a girl back home, but not sure, whatever. Okay, whatever. The third year he disappeared. And then I saw him in fourth year. I saw him at the corner of Yonge and Dundas at that, the booth where they're giving away the extremist material, the hadiths and all that sort of stuff, dressed like Osama bin Laden with sandals in the middle of the street and the beard and stuff, didn't even recognize him. And I saw him for a second. I'm like, yes, sir, is that you? So I went up to him. And I guess there was still a little bit of the old him still in there. And he recognized me. And he got a little bit uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I talked to him for a little bit. And he says, oh, no, my brother, everything's okay and whatever. I'm like, you're not going? He's like, no, I found the path. I found the way. So clearly the kid was brainwashed. And I know where he was brainwashed, sort of thing. And I think that's what we're seeing on a global scale. I often talked on my social media feed about the Red-Green Alliance. The very first podcast I did was with an intelligence analyst, a retired intelligence analyst, and his expertise was in the funding mechanisms of many of these NGOs and groups that are foreign, without getting into too much details. And this is the strategy that's being used all over the world to erode the West from the inside. Mm-hmm. And I can quote specific, thought leaders in those communities, but we know exactly what they're doing. And Turkey is a very concerning example, because what made Turkey unique? Ridvan, who runs Apostate Prophet, is a very well-known YouTube channel who discusses things in more detail. He made the best case for nationalism I've ever heard. And he said this: what made Turkey unique was when Ataturk said, our identity is going to be, we're Turkish. We're Turkish first, irrespective of your religion. Because there's all different interpretations of all religions. So it's Turkish nationalism first, religion is second. And what that allowed that country to do is become westernized and modernized, irrespective of different religious interpretations. It didn't go down the path of Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Iran. But now you have somebody who is always putting up the Muslim Brotherhood signal, which is Erdogan, has been doing it for many, many, many years, and is captured, we think, by the Muslim Brotherhood. He changed the laws so now religious fundamentalists can serve in the military, which they were banned from doing previously. And that's happening all over the world. And it's very interesting to see with people in the West. Like, I've been on this since I got involved politically, because I saw the signs within the political parties. And I was one of the few people that were screaming about this: don't entertain this cancer of extremism, all forms of extremism. Do not try to appease it, because we're going to destroy our society from within. And nobody listened. Oh, we got it under control. It's not going to go anywhere. And well, now, where are we? We're at the point where we're hearing the same rhetoric in the 1920s on the street here. And I always maintain, and I do have some criticisms for the Jewish community. We do a horrible job reaching out and telling people, explaining to them that it's not just the Jewish community we're concerned about. It's the Western communities, the Western values. Prior to October 7th, maybe 2 years before, I was having a conversation with a pastor I know. And I said to him, knowing that this is what's happening in the institutions and the government, I said to him, I'm not really worried about the Jews. I'm actually worried about the Christians, because I see how the Christians are being targeted in messaging and propaganda campaigns from, at that time, the woke left. And then October 7th happened, and all of a sudden the Band-Aids ripped off, and now we're seeing the emergence of the woke right that have all the same grievances of the woke left, but they just veil it with religion. But it's you have the progressive religion on one side, and you have traditional religion spewing the same nonsense. And all of us in the middle, who might have been more conservative or more liberal or whatever, we're all stuck without a voice, because we just all want to get along. But the fringes want to ensure that none of us get along. And that's
100%.
That's what I'm concerned about.
The Jewish community, I think, has, from my views, have done a good job of reaching out and building alliances with other groups, other religious groups, and there's a new alliance now that's come into existence, and I think there's a lot of work done in that way. There's not enough, but this isn't a myopic view, like you say, about the Jewish people living in Canada or the United States or everywhere. It's about, to me, it's about society, and I am not understanding why we want to allow, and I'm not going to get into the freedom of speech debate.
We're going to save that for the next.
We're going to save that for another, but there is a line between what is protected charter speech and what is a crime. Sorry, there is. But why do we want to live in a society where we are not inclusive and respectful? Why?
My standard is even lower. I don't care about inclusive. Just leave me alone. That's it. Just leave me alone.
It's not enough just to leave me alone. It's why do we want to ruin what we have? And again, this isn't about, oh, you're trying to put down the speech. Speech is legitimate. They have a protest against Israel or whatever. That's not what I'm talking about specifically. Mm-hmm. What I'm talking about is being able to go about your business in your city and have tourists and enjoy the city without being fearful of being chased because you're Jewish, being yelled at or spat at or screamed at because you're Jewish, or because you're an Iranian supporting Israel, or because you're something else. I don't understand why we want to ruin that. And it's being ruined at a very rapid pace.
I think this is going back to my thesis of this is all foreign funded. That is why so much money's coming in.
Of course it is. This is foreign funded.
And the problem
And that's why so many people are so stupid.
Well,
you know, they think this is some f***ing movement, and some people are, oh, it's about oppressor, oppressed, colonizers. And that's when I see people from the LGBT community jumping on the bandwagon, where if they were in any of those countries, they'd be f***ing dead. And then I say this, you know, in Israel, you know, in the Middle East, where's the largest pride parade? Tel Aviv, in Israel. Yeah. Not in any of those countries. And then they talk about all sorts of things. And it's like, you know, in the Supreme Court of Canada, the first time we had a Canadian Muslim appointed was 2021, a brilliant lawyer. And when was the first time a Muslim Israeli was appointed Supreme Court of Canada? 2022, a permanent member. And these are examples of integrating, inclusion, respect, valuing other opinions, valuing other religions. What's happening now is they want to tear that away without recognizing what achievements have been made, and creating a false narrative in order to rip away our society. It is shocking to me that we're just. I sometimes comment on this on X, and people say, "No, we're standing up for this. We're doing it. We're going to vote for, you know, a different government." It's not just the government. It's, you know, it's us. Why are we okay with this? Speak up. We all have a voice. And it's not okay. It's absolutely going to ruin our city. It's going to ruin our country.
Well, it's going to ruin the Western world as it creeps across the Western world.
I'm just being Canadian-centric for now, but it's already tearing at the United States has been so fractured over the last 8 years, and it's going to get more and more fractured now. You look at New York, you look at Chicago, you look at all the shit that's going on there, it's going to get worse.
So two things. I remember a couple of years ago now, but I've fielded similar calls. You know, I've lived in Latin America for quite a bit. And I remember one of my friends called me and said, I don't understand, what is libre Palestina? I'm like, oh, what she said, yes, there was 20 idiots walking through downtown Medellin holding signs saying, you know, libre, and he didn't know what this was. I'm like, oh, it's the same nonsense we're seeing everywhere, because they happened to build a super mosque a year before and brought in that same sort of stuff. So I think there's that's part of it, but I think our messaging and how we reach people is flawed, and I talk about this a lot in Twitter Spaces. One of the things we do, and I've tried with the Jewish community here in the past, met with many of them, whatever. Everybody knows everything, and we all know nothing. We're always trying to persuade people with facts, and the reality is, people are not persuaded by facts.
That's absolutely true.
And the other thing is, when we see, you know, this is my justification to conservatives when I tell them, don't attack people who are liberal. We are all just a compilation of the opinions we hear most frequently. That's really all we are. And we chase confirmation bias to reaffirm those opinions. And many of the people on that side of things, like, you know, the idiots that are brainwashing and basically destroying our civilization here who are Canadian, they just don't see any of the other facts. They see one set of arguments and nothing more. And I think this is why you've seen the cultural switch of people who've moved over to the conservative side of things. And I know you've made a little bit of that journey too. I wouldn't put you in either of those camps.
No, I used to be a liberal supporter.
No, I know. I'm
not today.
I'm not talking about party policies, just kind of
but in general,
philosophical framing. Yeah. Exactly. Because our legacy media is dominated by one philosophical school of thought, which is the liberalism, tolerance at all costs, no matter what. If people have a certain skin color, that means they're good. The people who are native to a country, they're bad. because they're white or whatever. Those people never see the arguments from the conservative side of things. But people who are conservatives can't avoid it because the mainstream is always fueling that. So what you have is two groups, I mean, it's more than two groups, but for simplicity, you have two schools of thought in society where there's one group of people who see one set of what they deem are the facts. They're subjected to lies by omission and they don't know it. And the other side that can see the full chessboard. And that's why more and more people are shifting over to the right. And today I actually had an hour-long conversation with somebody who's become a good friend of mine. His brother's very, very famous in the UK. And he's a progressive. He's a lefty, progressive guy, loves the BBC and whatever. But over time, really nice guy though, really good, open-minded, wants to hear opinions he disagrees with. And I remember he said to me, I had one set of ideals about what you went through in Canada and why you guys had a protest. He said, then I got to meet you. And he said, over all this time we've formed a friendship and been speaking, he said, I learned something. I wasn't listening to people and their grievances of the people I disagreed with. And he said, I'm a little embarrassed about it. And I'm starting to realize that the opinions that I had, some of them were completely flawed because I didn't get all the inputs I needed. I think that's happening with, and that's not you necessarily, but a lot of people in Canada. Like, how many people do you know in the Jewish community that were blindsided by October 7th, and now they're philosophically a little bit lost? They don't know where they are. Because people like myself and others, for a decade, have been trying to warn to where we're headed and what this is going to lead to. And we all wanted to live in, strawberries and whipped cream. No, life is great.
Maybe
everybody loves each other.
I like blueberries more.
Blueberries. You know what I mean? And it's this awakening. Remember I asked you after October 7th, what are your views on the right to self-protection? And you said, yeah, I've evolved a little bit, for sure. Or
Yeah, I
maybe
want to amend our
significantly.
gun laws.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'll be honest, I don't feel safe. I feel there's a level of lawlessness now which is permitted. There's normalization of anti-Jewish rhetoric. And so I think it's permeated me and many people I know. Many of us weren't necessarily, when October 7th happened and what unfolded afterward, didn't shock me as much as others.
Yeah.
I always knew in Canada that we had this thin veil of
Yes,
civility.
100%.
And below it there was a lot of this seething hatred and a lot of conflicting opinions and anger and everything else. But we did a pretty good job of trying to keep it down and then manage it. That was torn away. I don't think you can put the lid on it again. I think it's done. I think we've crossed that road. But you raised a point, which was, critical thinkers will want to listen to opinions, even ones that they don't like. Critical thinkers will want to listen to other facts so that they can form an opinion.
That's right.
And that's valuable. And that's valuable how we should have a discourse in Canada and talk about issues. Any issue, whether it's Israel, Gaza, whether it's Ukraine, Russia, whether it's inflation, whatever. We're seeing an absolute erosion of our ability to have this type of civil dialogue. And what we are allowing is lawlessness. What we're allowing is targeting of segments of society and saying they should be demonized. And we're allowing, in the form of hate speech protected under the Charter, to target and terrorize and intimidate a particular part of our society. And that's just f***ing wrong. Imagine for a moment if we were to walk down certain areas of the city and chant certain things at an identifiable group. We'd be arrested in a minute. But that's okay now if it's directed at the Jews. It's okay if it's directed at the Jews.
Which, by the way, is what white Canadians have been crying about for years. And unfortunately, when they see somebody who's Jewish, they always see somebody who's on the left. And they think we are all like that. And they don't understand we're not a monolith.
We are not.
That we have, you know, the old joke, you hear it every bar
There
mitzvah.
are Jews who are
20
NDP,
opinion,
liberal
20
and
people,
conservative.
30,
Yeah,
but 30 people, 40 opinions. Like that's what we all
yeah,
joke
you have
about.
30 Jews talk, you got 40 different opinions. And that's absolutely true. They're not on the left, they're not on the right, they're not in the center. They're across the whole divide. I think you're seeing a lot more turn to the right now.
So last night I was with a supporter of mine, and he's Catholic, very Catholic. And he was asking me about, you know, we talked a little about Judaism in the past. He's just interested in all religions. And he was asking me, he wanted to follow up on a conversation we had about, you know, the different types of Jews and stuff. And I said, for example, like he understands we're not a monolith, but a lot of people, maybe watching here, don't get this. I said to him, do you know what they do when you go to a Moroccan Jewish wedding? He said, what? I said, Judaism is not a culture. It's a religion. And you see that when you go to a Moroccan wedding and the Jews start doing this. You know the chant that they do?
Yeah.
The Arabic chants?
I've been to Jewish Arabic weddings.
Because they're Arabic Jews. That's the culture. The Judaism is not the culture. It's just the religion. I also said, what about Kafkazi Jews? He said, what's that? I said, Jews from Azerbaijan. You think I have anything in common with Jews from Azerbaijan? No, they're culturally completely different. And I think what we've done is we've sold this idea, and I understand why, because small numbers, you want unity and stick together, but I think it's blown up in our face a little bit, where now the world doesn't understand that the people who want diversity, that we're culturally diverse. I'm not Israeli, I'm Canadian.
I don't know if we sold that, or other people wanted to present it that way. Because Israel is a wonderful cultural pot of all, there's mosques, there's Ethiopian Jews, there's, you watch an Ethiopian Jewish funeral, it's completely different. And you can be involved in any number of these cultures and enjoy it. It's so diverse and so, and so interesting. And they're embracing of that. I think it's been sold by somebody else to try and paint them as certain things. That's where we have these tropes. That's where we have these ideas of what a Jewish person is.
No, I know many Jews who've, over my years, have always tried to, the Sephardic Jews will complain about this frequently, that they'll say, Sephardic Jews have nothing to do with polka music. Why do we hear polka music everywhere? But my point is that shows that it's not a monolith.
It's
not just one group, that they're all different, just like all Catholics are all different, right? And, I've been dealing a lot this past week with, the same old Jewish conspiracies. People went down the rabbit hole. They found, the Elders of Zion or whatever idiot, stupid book like that. Try to explain to them, that is communist material. When you brand all Jews as X or all Catholics as X, that's collectivism. That's your postmodernism. The oppressor versus oppressed, trying to put everybody into one monolithic group. And it's being used against us, but I think we don't do ourselves favors sometimes with our messaging.
Maybe, but it's kind of hard as a small segment of society that's been murdered as much as our group.
What do you mean? We control the world. Why are we world? We control everything.
If we did, I can tell you, I wouldn't be sitting in this basement.
Yeah, it's like we're getting genocided, or we control the world. Pick one. Which one is it?
They've been murdered throughout time. Jews have been murdered and enslaved, and Jerusalem's been conquered over and over. I mean, the history's ripe with this. Yeah. But that's not where I focus. There is an absolute insanity that's going on about demonizing Jews, the conflation between Zionism and anti-Semitism, where frankly 90% of Jews are Zionist, and that's about Jewish self-determination in a homeland. It's not necessarily about particular politics or policies that are being...
Well, that's Muslim Brotherhood propaganda.
But it's adopted and sold and repackaged, and everybody fucking loves it. You've got the head of fucking QP in Ontario just fucking gobbling it up and spitting it out where he should be worried about his fucking workers.
Well, because now he's got a safe word. He doesn't have to say Jew, he can say Zionist, but he means the same thing.
Him. And he's out on Labor Day with his keffiyeh on the same day that the murdered captives were being buried. There isn't an ounce of fucking decency left anymore. You want to have your politics, you want to have your disagreement, that's fine. Give a few hours. Give a few hours for memorializing people who were murdered in captivity. Give a few hours for that. Media had reported, that 6 hostages were found dead. No, they were shot dead to death. Now, Hamas wants to come out and release the remarks. I don't know if they've done it yet. They filmed them to give their last remarks before they'd be executed in captivity. Okay? Not, the reporting at first was with many, they were found dead. No, they were executed. And the lack of decency is what just drives me insane. And what drives me insane is that people want to buy into this and think that this is okay. And it's not. It's not okay. This is very bad. Yes, I know. I can have somebody quote me 40,000 Palestinians have died. Never mind 15 to 20,000 of them are Hamas combatants. And never mind at this very moment, the inoculation of children in Gaza is by a vaccine that was invented by a Jew. Polio.
But certain groups that might work against us, unfortunately.
No, but this is the joke about it.
I know.
They have done a good job, the forces that have been working on this for decades and plowing in the money to create this divide, to create this narrative, to brainwash people and to create false facts and to convince people of these things. They've done a great job and people just gobble it up and they're absolutely fucking stupid. And it's going to lead to the eradication of this lively life that we have in Canada and in the United States and in the Western world unless we realize it's got to stop. And I'm not talking about stopping immigration. I'm not stopping about, demonizing people from other religions. I'm talking about recognizing what is a terrorist, hateful act from wherever it comes and stopping it. Period.
There's somebody I know, she had married an extremist who ended up being the leader of a terrorist organization. A Canadian girl, she was just brainwashed, fell into it.
Yeah, you hear these stories.
And she told me she eventually had an epiphany and got out of it and realized after a couple of kids and many years that when the guy wanted his second wife, she realized, okay, well, there's something wrong here. But I remember she told me she was not allowed, once she was fully indoctrinated and covered and all that sort of stuff, couldn't go out of the house. She was only allowed to watch one source of media on television. Only one. And you know what it was? It was Al Jazeera Arabic. And she said, for 10 years, you know what I heard on Al Jazeera Arabic every day? White supremacy. The white people will kill you. The white supremacists are trying to take over the Ummah. Over and over again. She got to the point where she didn't want to go outside because she thought white people would kill her. And then one day she eventually woke up and realized and got out of it. So that's the degree of the repetition and brainwashing that is being used. That's why Al Jazeera was banned in the state of Israel. It's not because they're anti-free speech. It's because it's a propaganda tool because, again, we are a culmination of the opinions that we hear most frequently, those 5 opinions.
Look, I mean, whether you agree with Israel's move or not, I'm skeptical. You're very skeptical, of course, about any type of legacy media, and I'm skeptical about all media now.
The alternative media has gone just as bad as legacy media now.
I've tried to pay attention to the alternative media, and it troubles me equally. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to find reporting. I mean, I think that I've come down to just reading Associated Press a little bit.
Oh God!
But I can't even get through that.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's a problem. It's an informational war, and we've got social media. We are in a massive informational war.
But guess what? We're participating in it right now, which is
good
why
for
I wanted
us
to do podcasts.
Right. Well, when I started the Not on Record podcast with you and Max's inception of this with us, it was partly due to the fact of we wanted to get information out about what is wrong with the system and try and educate people about what they're going to face if, God forbid, they're charged and why they'll get charged and what's going to happen. Because people often didn't know and didn't understand the system. And I still get it today. It's like, how can this happen? And it's like, it's all video 101 will explain to you about that. This is on the other one. It was to provide some source of information. Yes, we're part of this. But, we're trying to impart information that's fairly accurate, going from case law, going from actual anecdotal evidence that we have. I don't see that. I just see rampant opinions across the board in media. And I just see the massive push to demonize and to tear apart. We are at a point where we're going to see that we will not be able to get along as a society. It's just going to happen. It's going to happen.
So I'm a little bit more positive, and I'll tell you why. There are certain spaces...
Kids don't want to go back to McGill University to go to school.
Good, they can go to trade school and learn a real job.
I understand. But if they want to go to McGill, they should be able to go to McGill if they're Jewish.
Yeah.
They should.
Yeah.
Without being fearful. If they want to go to Columbia, they should be able to go to Columbia. Have your fucking, peaceful rallies where you protest against Israel. Knock yourself out. Voice those opinions. Knock yourself out. Don't stand in the way of a Jewish kid and call them a pig and you should die because you're Jewish. That's a fucking crime.
I'll tell you something. When I was...
That is what's happening on our campuses.
Yes, I know, for sure. I mean, but it's the same source. Like what I was dealing with 10 years ago. Maybe that's why, I'm used to it. I saw it all 12 years ago.
I was in school. I know when protests would happen. I knew when there was conflicts in the Middle East. I knew exactly what would happen. But back then, 1986 and onward, when I was there was some ability to have discussions about topics. There was some ability to do that then. Now, you will get a complaint to the university that you're Islamophobic, or you're Russian phobic, or you're carpet phobic, or you're Nike phobic.
There's one phobic. There's one phobic that does this.
You're fucking suspended, or you've got a human rights complaint at the school, and the fix is in on you. That's what happens. There's no free exchange of ideas. There's only indoctrination.
All right. So should I give you a white pill? A little bit of optimism.
The blue. What are the pills in?
The white pills, the good pill, the black pills. You want the world to die.
No, I'm quoting Matrix. The blue.
That's the blue and the red. But there's also the white and the black.
Okay.
When I was on trigonometry, we were talking before we started the recording for a half hour, having coffee, whatever. And Francis starts by saying to me, he says, mate, I'm a liberal. I'm just not a fucking communist. I'm like, all right, then we are on the same page. And I think what we're all learning, I see this in the Bitcoin space, because that's an interesting space because you see people across the spectrum. I think we're moving away from the left-right, paradigm, that framing of the world. We're not living in 17th century France. It's no longer accurate. And I think what we're seeing is the emergence of it's the individualists versus the collectivists. And it's not binary, it's a spectrum. There are certain times, you see this in the Jewish community, where just to survive, we have to be a little bit more communal and collective on certain issues. But then there are many other issues in our lives where we're very individualistic. And I think that's
healthy.
I think that's where we're going. That's what I see when I interact with people across the political spectrum. Like that particular space has been very good in terms of reaching people across the spectrum. And unfortunately, so has October 7th. It's allowed me and other people to communicate with people in the Jewish community who might have bought into some of the framing of victimization and postmodernism, that it's woken something up within them, and they're now more amicable to speaking with people of differing political opinions. So there's a very famous guy, Alex Gladstein. He runs Human Rights Foundation, which is a Bitcoin related charity that does human rights stuff all over the world. I don't agree with some of the stuff, but I agree with some of it for sure. And he's on the complete opposite end. But we had a nice long conversation 2-3 months ago. And yeah, we have differing opinions, but people are starting to wake up and realize that they've been pushed into one of these silos. And the people on the liberal side now are starting to see the woke left for the first time. But my concern is the emergence of the woke right. But I do think,
Can you define that a little bit more so people understand what the woke right is?
yeah, it's the same grievances that's on the woke left. So, they complain about the patriarchy and Western civilization and the United States is the biggest terrorist country in the world, all that sort of nonsense, right? You see that on the right as well. That screw the system, they put a veil of religion on it often, and the United States is the oppressor, the 1% versus 99% arguments. It's the same grievance arguments, but one just identifies as being conservative and right-wing because they're conservative in their religiosity, and the left are, well, we know what the woke left is. And that's where I see the danger. So Nick Fuentes is a good example of one of these mouthpieces for Qatar, by the way. That's the emergence of the woke right? And really they're left-wing, if anything, because they're identitarian, which is a left-wing philosophy. I think it's going to be bumpy. There's no question. There's going to be bumpy roads.
It's definitely bumpy.
But in the past, I mentioned this before, I was watching the Ayn Rand UK channel, and never before would you have seen any of the Ayn Rand, very libertarian think tanks going to bat reluctantly, saying, yeah, we don't really like Netanyahu, not our politics, but it's very unfair what's happening to Israel, and going and explaining and articulating factually everything that's going on the ground there. That never would have happened in the past. So I see all these glimmers of positivity and hope that are coming down the pipeline.
But some of the things I've dealt with, particularly some women from Iran who came to Canada and had battles at universities because of their challenging of what professors were saying, white professors were saying.
Yeah.
And they were talking about their lived experiences of being raped, of not being able to use their education or practice law, and having that taken away from them here in Canada. Their voices and their complaints were not legitimate and basically faced academic censure as a result of trying to speak up. And I think that there is some element of similarity now in what some segments who are against the regime in Iran, who have experienced and are seeing the distortion of information and the demonization, and are saying that's not the reality, and trying to speak up, and then facing the same blowback as what somebody who stands up and is Jewish and saying that's not the experience. There is a commonality there now more than ever.
Yeah. Also, what's very interesting when
and it's terrifying that some white professor would say to this person, "You're f***ing wrong," and get out of my class. Because
it's not about white or brown. It's about a collectivist.
It's about oppressor, oppressed.
Exactly.
It's about fitting their narrative.
And what's interesting, when I was producing Tom's podcast, I produced it for 4 years, learned so much about how that aspect of government works. And people would often say, why don't Muslims speak up specifically about the Islamists? And there's a very good answer. There's a very good reason.
But some do.
No, what they do, because they still have families back home and they're small communities. Like, people don't understand here, when you have a passport from Iran, it's your date of birth, the country of Iran, and your tribe. And that is a foreign framing of the world that we don't understand in the left, how tribal parts of the Middle East are. But what they do is they can't go out and grab a microphone. Some of them do now. They're getting a little bit more brazen because they've been here long enough. But go out and start outing people in the community. One is because of lawfare. They're lawfaring everybody. But the other reason is because their families back home get put at risk. So you know what they do? They would leak information to us. You know how many people I know, Muslims, Chaldeans, Coptic Christians, who send me information because I know people in government and the political parties and law enforcement, that they'll know if it's relevant, I can share it with them. That's how they fight back. And their grievance is, and they want to go and shake Justin Trudeau till his head falls off, which doesn't take much shaking, to say, I came here to get away from this, and you're now bringing it here and putting it in government. And they don't seem to understand when people refer to Islamists, extremists, we're not talking about Muslims, we're talking about extremists. It's like the same view of Colombians. All Colombians are not drug lords. But it does seem to be that that is their opinion. Whenever those of us talk about concerns, people in the Muslim world, in the Muslim communities talk about these concerns, it's, oh, you're being Islamophobic, right?
Yeah, that's so far from the truth.
It's so frustrating.
No, but there are, I've seen, and there's been support from the Muslim community. There's advocacy, strong advocacy that's coming out. They don't like to see this and don't want to see it. And
they tried to get away from this, right?
Yeah, I just think, when I'm this doomsday type of speech, I've seen, again, a coalescing of interests, people who are outspoken from various backgrounds, who are Muslim, who are, from the Middle East but are Christian. I've seen them talking. I've had conversations. They're part of organizations. They are speaking out. It's not enough, because it's not so much them. It's the ignorance of everybody else, in my opinion, as to the tolerance and the normalization of hate and intimidation now at a level that I have never seen. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've seen this level of hate and intimidation in my adult life.
Can I now?
I don't think I.
Can I give you another white pill, and you're going to shake your head and tell me I'm crazy? But I'm telling you, I'm right about this. One of the other positive signs I see in this is now the Band-Aid is ripped off.
Yeah, I know
now
what
we
you're saying.
can see what's actually going on behind the curtain, and we can deal with it. It's very difficult to debate with people who harbor extreme views and are unwilling to share it, because it's just going to metastasize over time. Well, now it's out in the open. And that's why I know a lot of people don't understand it, but I try to engage with people who maybe are confused about Israel and the Middle East. And look, you may not have seen.
There's nothing wrong with engaging with them. Dialogue is important.
To try to persuade them. And you know what? I've had some successes and I've had some failures, but I've had more successes than I've had failures.
Look, I think dialogue is important. I think listening is important. If you can at least have a dialogue, whether they will eventually agree with you or not, but you're able to have a dialogue, that is healthy.
That's right.
What is not healthy is any type of crimes that are motivated by hate and bigotry against Jews, Muslims, Christians, anybody else. That cannot be tolerated. And that is what is being tolerated now.
Well, we're tolerating the mujahideen on our streets. Yeah. And in our government.
It's here. It's out. Flying the Hamas flag, celebrating October 7th. It's a threat to everybody.
It's fascinating that.
Period. That's what tears away at the fabric of societies. That's what creates tensions. That's what pits people against people.
It's fascinating when you see people get brutally murdered like savages from 2,000 years ago, and the world turns against the victims. And the people who perpetuate it are the same ones who used to complain about rape culture, right? Oh, you're blaming her for wearing the wrong clothes. Well, that's exactly what they're doing to us. That's how much they've twisted their philosophical worldview into a pretzel. But I think this is part of how we fix things. It's just going to take time.
But how do we? So I'll just say this one other thing. I posted something about Sudan, which got zero attention.
Okay.
They're having a bad war in Sudan, and there are about 20 million or more people in Sudan who not only are experiencing food insecurity, but are at the cusp of starvation. And the two fighting factions aren't doing a very good job about allowing aid in. Recently, through pressure from external groups and the international community, has aid come in, but not nearly enough. And the amount of deaths and murders are unfathomable. Nobody gave a shit about my post.
Yeah, I'll tell you why.
Because it didn't involve a Jew.
So I asked.
But it's shocking, because it's happening, and in fact, we've raised awareness about this before, and it's just It's not on anybody's radar. They don't care.
So I asked this individual who has lots of experience, decades of experience in this, both at the UN and in Canada and the Canadian government and stuff. And I said, and this guy's not Jewish, as you know, most of the people in my life aren't Jewish. And I asked him, I said, explain to me the Jewish conspiracy. Why is it always, why does this keep resurfacing so frequently? It's just this lazy interpretation of the world. It's cartoonish. And he said, oh, we know exactly why. And he said, in fact, that's why from an intelligence perspective, we see the Jews as the canary in the coal mine. It's not because the Jews are special or they're paying us money. He said it's the best indicator and warning that extremism is growing within your society and your society is not healthy. It's the best bellwether that we have. I said, okay, so why does it resurface? He says, it's pretty simple, human psychology. The world is very complex. One of the things I talk about in spaces with Bitcoin people all the time, people have this top-down view of the world, that there's a small group of people with a monocle kissing their pinky finger saying, I'm going to control you, I'm going to control the government, whatever. That's farther from the truth. Most people who are of, the ultra wealthy, they're paranoid that this whole thing is going to fall apart as well. That's why they're throwing millions of dollars to different groups, because they think people on the ground can try to fix it. They know what to do. But he said, when you get to economic times of strife, you get to times where food is expensive. That's the number one thing that they look at, the price of food. The world is complex, and many people can't process or don't want to process a complex solution, or even worse, to say, we don't know. It's very complicated. People can't process that. They want a simple answer. And he said, what's the simplest answer? Just blame the smallest group. It's easier.
Yeah, well,
that's human psychology, and that's what leads to. That's why we always get blamed, because it's a group that, Scott Adams said this best, and I posted this on my Twitter feed. He said, because he had some, anti-Semitic trolls in his chat that were making him crazy, and he said, okay, I just got to stop. And he said, a bunch of you are just posting these things that Jews control the media and this and that stuff. And he said, I don't know how many do. There's lots of people who are successful in business. He said, let me tell you why. Let me tell you the big secret that you're not figuring out. Let's call them the Albonians. And imagine you have a group of Albonians that put all of their focus on education, to the point more so than most other cultures. It's because they went to fucking school. That's why they're successful. Why don't you send your kids to school? You send them to school, they're going to become the top people of industry. And you know what? He said, maybe you should work for them. Doesn't matter their background. You should be working for the people who went to school and got a PhD or an MBA or whatever. And he said, I went to school with many of these people when I got my MBA. That's it. You haven't figured that out? It has nothing to do with a religion or one particular group. It's just people who go to school. It was hysterical. But that's how government sees it, and that's his perspective why
Well,
we're in
government,
this predicament again.
you just look at politicians running for office, and they don't pose anything in a complex manner. It's always the basics. It's always the lowest
Focus groups.
It's the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
Look at these focus groups. The cost of bread is too high. Meat has gone up by 50%. It's the same bullshit over and over, without posing anything in a complex way with a complex solution and telling people the truth, that here's the reasons why, and this is why it's going to be hard for a while. None of that people don't want to hear, and it's a problem. But look, we'll see if we have more of these discussions, if people are interested in what we're saying. Yeah. But I just think now was something we needed to talk about, because there's been two incredible shocks that personally affect me and my family. October 7th, and then the execution of the 6 hostages, which is, there aren't words to describe the repugnance of it. But what poignantly demonstrates to me The day after that is that we have a level of indecency, hatred, and intimidation that will continue to go on, that is normalized, that I believe is dangerous to everybody, Jewish, Muslim, Catholic, other denominations,
Canadians,
Christianity,
right,
Hindu,
yes.
and all Canadians, because we are all Canadians, and we should be all Canadians.
And I think that's an important message that sometimes gets lost.
Well, I don't think we think of ourselves this way. And when I see this going on, we don't think of ourselves as Canadians.
That's right.
And what they don't understand is the risk of what we run, yes, in Western society, but I'm talking about Canada now, of tearing away of the fabric of what we are as Canadians.
And it's equally damaging.
And it's not going to be solved by the Leafs winning the Stanley Cup.
It's also, it's never going to happen. It's equally damaging too when you have institutions like the CBC that have preference for their new hirees that they're not to be white or male. That is a massive problem, and we're not talking enough about that either.
Lots of things have to be done to try and bring in people from other walks of life into media and into business, but we have to do it on a balanced way.
On merits.
I think I'm a big believer in merit.
That's right. Me too.
Whether you ascend to media, in law, to judicial positions, what have you, merit's very important. I don't care. We need smart people in smart places doing important things.
So you're a big Kamala supporter, I guess. All right.
I won't answer that.
Don't answer that, Joe.
Right now, I don't know where the United States is heading, but
Things are going to get better, I promise.
all right.
It's
Do
just
we
gonna
do
take
pillow
time.
talk for this? I don't know. This is different
Pillow
than our
talk.
regular podcast.
Okay, what are the 3 words?
Like, share, subscribe.
When are you getting new pillows?
Very soon. And sweatshirts.
I like these pillows.
Like, comment, subscribe. It's just like, it doesn't flow.
It's like a Rubik's Cube. Just like mush it up and get it in the
Rubik's
right
Cube is
order.
just 17 moves and you've solved it. That's easy. All right.
I did in 12.
You're holding the pillow this time. I hold it last time. There you go.
Okay, so
Like, share,
do not
subscribe.
forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share.
Killing me.
Good night, everybody. Thank you
Night.
for listening. Bye.